Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're just going to give everyone a couple minutes to get logged in, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Looks like it's going to be an absolutely glorious day. Another one.
All right. Well, for those of you that are here ready, I think let's go ahead and get ourselves going. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Data for Impact to talk about how to navigate the United for Alice database. New Mexico's had this data set, I think, for about 6 months now. And so we're just really excited to spend some time this morning looking at the tool and hopefully some ways that it can be useful to you in your work. My name is Sarah Earhart. I'm the Director of Community Investments here at United Way, and I will be monitoring the chat and Q&A as we move through the presentation. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them there. And then we should have plenty of time at the end as well to answer any questions that you have. And with that, I am happy to introduce our presenter for today. Jeanette Brawl is the statewide director for ALICE. We're very fortunate to have her in-house here at United Way of North Central New Mexico. And she is going to tell you all about this resource.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate you making time for this morning. We're going to go through a number of aspects of the data where it's housed at the United for Alice website and kind of indicate some of the tools that might be of most use to you, and then just look at some actual data. This has been quite the journey. The United for Alice journey has been a very rewarding one. We are joining a number of other states who have more experience with Alice than we do, and we're still learning from them. We received, as Sarah mentioned, the data in September. So about 5 months ago, it was reviewed prior to its release. So we had some very able and committed researchers from across the state vet and review this data so that you can be assured that what you're seeing is accurate and complete and reflects New Mexico and our nuances. And just a real quick reminder that all of this data is brought to the state by the United Ways of New Mexico and some very generous sponsors. So because there are costs associated with that, we were fortunate to partner with a number of organizations to bring the data to us. This data is accessible by anyone. It's very public and very transparent, and that is by design. And this last year's report in September was the first of 3. So we're going to be announcing the second report, which is more of an update, early summer, and then a big report again in 2027. The data that we're going to look at today is from 2023. That's the newest, best data that is comprehensive enough to compile and share. Something I'm going to show you, and I think you'll appreciate, is that all the charts that we'll be looking at are cited. So there is a citation as to what, where that data is pulled from. U.S. Census, USDA, U.S. Department of Transportation, or other data sets. Some of those charts and data sets have notes attached to them, so explanatory how they came to those numbers, and then all are downloadable. So we really feel like that could be an advantage to you as you utilize this data. So the last word about Alice that I'll give before we look at the site is that the methodology that has been used to to collect and compile this data is very comprehensive. I know data exists all around our state, but this is a way to pull it together, and then you'll be able to see where they got this data, and you can see the methodology on the website. So now I'm going to show you how we do access this data and the various ways. So there's tabs that we'll go through, and then there are reports that I won't look at, but they're downloadable reports on special topics. So I'm going to go ahead and get us going. And again, if you have questions as we go along, do put those in the chat, and Sarah can help bring those to the forefront. And then at the end, we'll have another opportunity for questions, and we can talk some more. So I want to say that I came right to the New Mexico site. So this is unitedforalice.org, and we are one of this many states, and our data resides here under New Mexico. So if you are able to look at the report, it is an excellent summary. However, it is all state level data. So the numbers and the data that are reported and included in this report, and it's about a 32-page report, are all going to refer to different data points at a state average. I'll show you in a minute how we'll get into county and other place reporting. On the side here are our favorite tabs. There's a general introducing ALICE tab that really is just an overview of who is ALICE, and again, those who've invested in this work to bring it to New Mexico. Key findings is next. We feel like the key findings are the quick start numbers that give a very much an overview. And of course, this chart is the big headline here, and that is that in our state, 17% of households are considered at the federal poverty level or below. And then this ALICE designation, 29% of our state are those folks who do not meet the federal poverty level designation, but in fact are struggling to make ends meet in their locations. So again, there's a bit about the methodology and how many different sources inform this data. And then we go into the cost of basics and some of the primary demographics. So all of these items are accessible discreetly, and I'm going to show you one map that has them as well. There's a bit about the occupations that are likely to be ALICE and ALICE's participation in the labor force. There's a whole section there. And trends in financial hardship, so that if we're wanting to see poverty or number of ALICE households and how those have changed over time, particularly with inflation, that can be very compelling data. And then other data sets that let us know how ALICE households are faring. So those are the key findings. Now we'll take a quick look at the cost of basics. So the ALICE nomenclature is predicated on 8 different elements, and we call it the ALICE Household Survival Budget. So as we all look at our own budgeting for our families, this includes housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, technology, taxes, and then just this slim little 10% for miscellaneous. And each of these items is, again, cited, and they explain generally what they'll be looking at in terms of technology. Here it's talking about they're considering broadband internet at home and a smartphone plan with unlimited data for each adult in the household. And then the sources for those costs come from Consumer Reports and US Telecom. So that tells you what is giving the guidance for the numbers that are pooled. For instance, in housing, they use 110% of the fair market rent for an efficiency 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment based on family size, including utilities. That's why utilities is not here as its own item. And then adjusted in metro areas. This is a way to really set the parameters around what do we mean when we say housing. We can go into what it costs for a family in New Mexico to live at and cover their basic needs. And we can do that by state or by county or even by counties. But this chart is, again, these 8 elements of costs. So housing, childcare, food, etc., but by household type. So single adult, and then 1 adult, 1 child, etc. We often refer to the 2 adults and 2 children in childcare, just because that does describe a lot of households. But certainly under consideration are those who are 65 and older, or just 2 adults, no children. And when you get to the bottom of this chart, there is the monthly cost, so just the total of the 8 different areas, and then an annual total and the hourly wage or wages required to meet those bare basic needs. So in the case of 1 adult with 1 child in childcare, that person would need to be earning $26.40 an hour, or $52,000, almost $53,000 a year, to be able to pay $814 a month in rent, to pay $975 a month in childcare, and of course, with universal childcare, we hope more families are able to have that cost covered. But if we're counting childcare, that's the cost they're using, food, etc. For 2 adults, 2 children, on average, in the state of New Mexico, it costs, if they have both children in childcare, $90,000, over $90,000 just to meet those basic needs. There are mapping tools and other tools that we'll go into in a moment, but I want to share how we look at a county. And since we're coming to you from Bernalillo County, and it's the first one in the list, I'm going to use Bernalillo. So that chart just now repopulated because the costs for housing in Bernalillo County differ from another county, and maybe food or transportation or a number of costs. This is localized data to Bernalillo County. So now you're seeing that this 2 adults with 2 in childcare, in fact, went up in Bernalillo County. Costs are higher, primarily for housing, but other costs as well. And so that $90,000 that I talked about as a state average, it's actually in Bernalillo County, $95,000, almost $96,000. Combined hourly wages would have to total $48 an hour to afford this. So that, I think, is very illuminating as to some costs of basics. But let's go back to our sidebar. And now I'm going to share costs over time. So for anyone wondering, you know, what kinds of basic goods and services are included, that's where you can find this. And so there's a link to the goods and services that are included in this measure. So they're talking about here about inflation and how ALICE Essentials Index, so the numbers that look at those costs over time and how those change. And so if you want to just see a graphic of how inflation is in our state for ALICE households, this is the chart. So this chart has data going back to 2007. So again, we're talking here at cost of living that we've had data for some time. The data jumped dramatically in 2022 and has really been rising. So we have 2025 data here, as opposed to most of this data is 2023, because this is, you know, inflation and other brought from indexes that are more readily available. It's more current. So the ALICE Essentials Index and how that all plays out for our state and for regions and nationally, that chart is found here. I've not spent a ton of time with this chart, but I think it will be interesting to see how that might serve us as we look at costs over time. Again, when we're talking about the ability to afford our lives, we're talking about wages because ALICE is employed. So as this sort of indicates, wages are rising, but costs are rising more quickly. And this gives an example of different occupations. These are the 20 most common occupations that are likely to be ALICE occupations, typically because they are lower wage. So these are our essential workers. These are the folks who are caring for our children, who are driving our goods around, who are maintaining our roads, who are doing a plethora of things that we can't do without, but typically being paid at a lower wage measure. So of these 20, only one occupation, construction and laborers, goes up beyond about $45,000. So construction labor looks more like 46,930. So that average is a little higher. But administrative assistants who earn $40,000 a year fall short. If they are one adult, one school-age child household, they fall short by almost $4,000 to afford those basics. Let's look here at childcare workers. So the median annual wage for a childcare worker is $30,000, just shy of $30,000, $14,000 less than required if that's a single adult household with a school-age child. So I think when it comes to wages, knowing those occupations that are more likely to be ALICE and how that they look against each other is really helpful information. And now I'll go back to another tab. We're going to look at demographics. So ALICE data is available by a number of different demographic groups because ALICE households include people, as stated here, of all genders, ages, races, and ethnicities, and household types. So again, this chart is the New Mexico chart, but we can localize this to counties, and I'll show that in a moment. In New Mexico, the dark blue bar refers to those who meet the federal poverty level threshold. The lighter blue bar would be the ALICE households, and anything in yellow is above that. And then this gray bar is total households. So you can just compare against single male-headed households, single female-headed household, and married households. And as you'll see, the folks who fare the worst are single female-headed households. And this is true in every ALICE state. Above the ALICE threshold here are 11,820 households in the state. At ALICE, there are 16,000 households that are ALICE, and then when you add poverty, it's another 27,000 households. You can also look at that chart over time this way. So in 2018, that number was on the down slope. And in 2019, we see a tick up of single female-headed households, and then that are ALICE, below the ALICE threshold, struggling to pay all those bills. And then the married folks in the middle, and the single male households here at the bottom. We can do the same by households, by age of those in the household. So under 25, 25 to 44, 45 to 64, and 65 and older. And this, again, same color configuration to indicate that. And you can also see that data over time. So as it applies to age. And then I'm going to remind you, we're looking at all of this at the state level right now. So this is state data, but we can look at race and ethnicity. And a word about this is that while the some of the categories look like they are disproportionately ALICE or in poverty, oftentimes that's because there are so few numbers of that race or ethnicity. So that figures into it. And then you can see over time how different ethnic groups, this is the green is the Hispanic ethnic group. There's been a bit of a dip there for the rise here is in Hawaiian Pacific Islander households, and the others are holding somewhat steady in the past several years. So if we were to come back up here and change all of this to a county, again, we'll pick Bernalillo. It changes the data because it's county specific. So now we're able to see that in Bernalillo County, those families with children, fare better than the state average. And that changed these charts as well. Dramatically in some cases. So it's very much, you can dial into just what you need. And now I'm going to go back to our little sidebars, ALICE and the labor force. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, it has to do with wages and the employment. Alice is often working maybe more than one job, but often in non-scheduled work without benefits, more tenuous work. A lot of these occupations do not have benefits or much in the way of benefits, and that really affects an Alice household. So this chart gives the total employment for these different occupations, the median hourly wage, and the percent of workers in this occupation who are below that Alice threshold. And I don't believe, let's see. So labor status, yes, it is available by county. So this chart shows those who have a full-time salaried job versus someone full-time hourly, part-time hourly, part-time salary, unemployed, not in the labor force, and not in the labor force due to retirement. So these numbers vary county to county, as you might suspect. Uh-oh, it's having a hard time. It's manually counting everything, I guess. Looks like it, oh, there it goes. It could take some time to populate this, but the chart changed somewhat, as you can see. Not in the labor force in Bernalillo County is higher here, as is, I believe, full-time hourly. So that changes county to county. Who's working more, who's working in different kinds of occupational settings. Let's go back to this, and I'll show you some trends in hardship. Real quickly, this again is trends of who's been Alice over time. Very similar to other charts that we've seen, but just based on poverty and Alice. And then I'll take you to county reports. The county reports are handy if you want to download and have a 2-page summary of a county. That's very helpful. So let me manipulate my page a little better here. We'll go to Bernalillo County. Gives us a snapshot, so some point in time data, some highlights. In 2023, the number of households, the population, median household income, labor force participation rate, and it shows you compared to the state average. So in Bernalillo County in 2023, labor force participation rate of 63% was better than the state average of 59%. And then those who can be described as Alice households versus Alice or households in poverty. So all of this is downloadable. All of this can be included in a county report. So we have here household types, ages, and again, that infamous chart that describes the household survival budget and how that looks for different family configurations. We even have a mapping tool here. So this is Bernalillo County, and you can manipulate that to see number of households. Now I want to make sure we cover some more things. These indicators of well-being. Not an area I'm terrifically familiar with, but I think as we all learn about this data, we'll be able, the internet access indicator is one that they've done for all states, but there are other indicators that over time we could do deep dives into something like housing burden. That would show up here. How many households have a housing burden of 30% or more of their income goes to to rent. So those are available for purchase, and those would populate these graphics here. And then another way to see data is this sort of scattergram about internet access, that indicator of well-being. And now I'm going to take you to some of these tabs at the very top, because I don't want to miss an opportunity to show you other ways to look at data. One is some of these tools and dashboards. First is one that we look at is the ALICE Income Status tool. And that allows us to compare household costs and income by plugging in a configuration. So you can pick your state. And so here we could see how we compare to Colorado or another state altogether. But if we pick New Mexico, and then you can again pick a county. Let me switch this around. If we pick Bernalillo County here, and then we can look by monthly income, or we can look by, and it's already automatically populated with one adult. But if we want to change that to 2 adults with a preschooler and a child in school, these numbers were changing based on those configurations. So you can design your own snapshot. And so that tells us for this household configuration in Bernalillo, at this household paying for housing and childcare and all of these costs would need $7,000 a month, $84,000 a year, or combined wages of $42 an hour. Next, I want to show you another data tool. It's called the ALICE Economic Viability Dashboard. And this is a way to really, I won't spend too much time here. It is very complex. This is a way to explore data on work, housing, and community resources for households below the ALICE threshold by location and by race and ethnicity. So once you populate all of that here, it will give you a map. And so we can look at, you can compare. This is where you can click on things and then compare up here. And then lastly, I want to spend a minute on the wage tool. The wage tool allows us to, let's pick New Mexico here, to look at, you slide this bar at $14 an hour for a family of 3. They're predicating this on a family with 2 workers and a child. This map indicates that 61% of households in 61% of New Mexico counties, the survival budget is supported. Oops, trying to zoom in a little bit here. And then if you hover, it will tell you over, let's pick Sandoval, $16.71 an hour is needed per worker, so those 2 adults, to support a family of 3. So this is a quick way to determine both the configuration of a household and then what the pay is required to live there in those counties. And there is a list of each county. So whether or not that pay amount, $14 an hour, will that support a family of 3 in Bernalillo County? No. it can in Catron, Chavez, Cibola, and other counties. And then you can slide this hourly wage tool and go up to $16 an hour, and you can see that at $16 an hour, both workers earning $16 an hour, they can support their family of three on that. In it looks like most counties, with Sandoval being the outlier. All right. We're making good time here, but I do want to go into a couple of other features of ALICE, and these are special reports. So they have done over the years in at United for ALICE some very specific looks at data. This is national reports, and then there are something called issue briefs. So the national focus series have been on children, people with disabilities, and veterans. And the issue brief just came out last year, and it's on the dental divide, and which is a big indicator of health. So for our ALICE in Focus series, these special reports on children, people with disabilities, and veterans, we could look at veterans. So this data, there's a national research brief, and then there are state research briefs and state comparisons. So for those who are working with our veteran population, this is a deep dive into the numbers who are experiencing poverty, who are at the ALICE level, and then again, by the demographic of their age, sex, race, ethnicity, a number of different ways to look at how veterans are faring. So these topics are, I think, for folks who work with children or work with people with disabilities, can be hugely beneficial. And I'm going to also show you, let's see, national data, other reports here. So we've got the national overview of ALICE, some national reports, and other reports. They've done two, Understanding Economic Mobility and ALICE in the Nonprofit Workforce. Nonprofit study came out in 2024 and Economic Mobility in 2025. There are also a number of mapping tools. I've shown you a couple, but this is one stop location for a mapping tool that allows us to dial into combining a number of different things. So we'll pick New Mexico. You can just get snapshots of total numbers in poverty, etc. And then you can compare that to other locations. Also want to say, for those looking at policy, there's a legislative district tool. And not only can you map out congressional districts, but you can map state legislative districts as well. And I'm going to put us on New Mexico so that we're not looking at New Jersey. And then you'll see this is the congressional districts, of course, but here is state legislative districts. Then after we choose one, we'll just pick, I don't know, I'll pick something really different. Let's look at, it's a little hard to manipulate this, but this State House District 70, it tells you the number of households above or below the ALICE threshold. And it also gives demographics in that State House District. Tells you the number of households below the ALICE threshold. And then the numbers participating in SNAP. That's this red bar. So you can look at that up right down to districts. And let's see, I believe there's one other quick area that I will overview. So with ALICE, we have the opportunity to imagine the kinds of responses that we can collectively or individually have to improve the situation of these households. So one of the ways, as I mentioned, is learning from others. And while United Ways have programs and services that are assisting ALICE now, as you know, we work with our partners to collaborate and imagine what other things we can be doing to help our communities. This page describes ideas and ways that other locations and states have been helping ALICE. So we can look at these and it gives us ways to imagine, would that work here? Is that something we could do? There's all kinds of stories here, and you can do a keyword search, or you can do it by year. You can look at just what has the state of Hawaii done? There you go. That tells you different stories of how they've worked with partners, or they've made policy changes in their state to address the ALICE households. You can also look at target populations, impact. You can just look at this in so many ways. And I've looked at a lot of them, but by no means have I read every inspiring story. But there are a lot of ideas here. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then one last thing, there's a tab up here called ALICE at Work. This is a way for employers to participate in a 12-hour training that really can take the employer deep into the ALICE makeup of their workforce and help them strategize on how they can support those employees. So I didn't want to not mention that. And so that by and large is the various and sundry in many ways that you can look at data in our state and in other states. So I'm going to stop sharing. And at this point in time, I am happy to take questions. And Sarah, you're going to tell me if there were questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat so far, but invite anyone who has a question to please feel free to come off mute and ask Jeanette.
What more can I tell you about ALICE data? Besides, there's a lot of it. Did you see any data that immediately made sense to you? Like, oh, that applies to the work we're doing. I think we could use some of that data. Did you see anything in our overview that piqued your interest? Not necessarily.
Jeanette, just to maybe offer the group a concrete example of how I felt or how I found this information really useful.
Great.
We have United Way has a program up in Santa Fe to help provide transportation services to those who need it. And so we were able to pull the cost of transportation data, transportation access by different demographic populations to really highlight how it's particularly challenging for seniors. And because we could show the data, looking at how much more of a burden transportation was for the senior population, we were able to work with a funder to help us fund that portion of our program for seniors. So it can be really useful if you are working with with corporations or with funders who have interest in particular demographics, to be able to kind of pull out those specialized figures can be
That's
really convincing.
Yeah, that's a great example because, I think there are tools available nationally that sort of indicate how families might fare based on housing, maybe housing and food, but you don't always see transportation wrapped into that. And in Western states, transportation is a huge indicator of access to resources, right? So I think that's a really great example of who needs transportation. Well, that'd be everybody, but who needs it the most and who's without it? So I think that's a great example. Thank you for that. I also think that just understanding, so we can look at ALICE and we can say a certain number of households in this zip code or this, excuse me, county are ALICE, fall under this ALICE designation. But then I think the chance to go deeper and really understand, again, are those single parent households? Are those young households? Are those people 65 and older who are still employed? And really start to understand who in different locations is struggling. I know when the United Way in Carlsbad first looked at this data, they were floored by the number of folks 65 and older in their county who were under this ALICE designation. So they're able to then design perhaps programs or efforts to recognize and assist the challenges that those households in particular face. All right.
Well, Jeanette, I am going to volunteer you that if anybody does have questions that come up after, or if you're going through the data set and you have questions about how to find pieces that you need or how to interpret what you're seeing, I know Jeanette will be happy to answer those for you.
And not only that, it helps me to answer questions, to learn how useful this may or may not be to our community. It helps me get familiar with navigating the data because there is a lot of it. And if I can't answer it, we can't figure it out together, we always go to our partners at the United for ALICE, the United Way of Northern New Jersey, where all of this work originates from. They have been extremely helpful in helping us understand certain data. So we also have these researchers, Kristen had to leave us, that have worked with data for years and are data wonks. So we can really have those deeper conversations if need be. So please, if as you go along in your work and you're trying to figure out how to look at some data, please do feel free to reach out. Is my email in the chat? I can put it there.
I haven't put it in yet, but if you want to drop it in.
I will do that. In closing, I just want to say that, we know our partners, are working alongside of us to help our community and to ensure that ALICE households are seen, that we understand their challenges and do our best to meet those challenges. So I thank each and every one of you for your partnership in that. I applaud you for taking a little time this morning and look forward to maybe the next iteration of this will be an even deeper dive. We'll see how that goes, but I want to thank you for your time this morning.
Great. Well, thanks again, everyone. And again, Jeanette's email is in the chat. I recognize a lot of faces here. I know you all have my contact information too, so I'm happy to facilitate that connection as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you all.